Matt, we have a big fight at strawweight between the Tiny Tornado, Tecia Torres, and Brianna Van Buren, the Bull. And it gets very interesting because these are some of the smaller strawweights that you're going to see in the UFC. There's certain sites that have Brianna Van Buren listed as 4'11", UFC going with 5 feet. And for Tecia Torres, 5'1", reach pretty darn close. Mike Goldberg would say that they were virtually identical. But in terms of their wins and losses and their recent performances, they are anything but identical because for Brianna Van Buren, she's been an absolute force in her last number of fights. She's beaten some recognizable names, the likes of Jamie Moyle, Juliana Lima, Kaylin Curran, and of course, Livia Hanata Souza in her last time out. And she looked absolutely amazing in her UFC debut. You could take what you want from Invicta. I know, their tournament format, Matt doesn't like it because some of the fights are one-rounders. They still count as a win on your pro record. But for what it's worth, Brianna Van Buren in her last fight looked absolutely amazing. I can't take anything away from Tecia Torres. I know she's on a 4-fight losing streak, and there's a reason why this fight is somewhat close in terms of the odds. Because for Tecia Torres, it was Jessica Andrade. She loses the decision. All right. Then she fights Joanna Jędrzejczyk, loses the decision. Then she fights Zhang Weili, loses the decision. And then in her last time out, again, losing another decision against a very good up-and-comer in Marina Rodriguez. So it's tough to try and take too much away from Tecia Torres because you know that her bread and butter is typically her wrestling, but her striking's kind of coming along. And in that last fight against Marina Rodriguez, she had the chance to go back to Florida, start training for that one. This one, it's different. I mean, back in Colorado, just due to circumstance, really. And I mentioned it from the top, the odds. The odds are actually somewhat far apart right now. I mean, Brianna Van Buren minus 210 favorite. Tecia Torres around a plus 165, 170 underdog. The overwhelming majority of fans at a 776, 66% are going with Van Buren. A further 86% predicting the win by decision. I certainly don't see it that way. And I'll get to that later on. How do you see this fight going? And can Brianna Van Buren be stopped at this point?
Can Brianna Van Buren be stopped? Maybe not in this fight, but maybe in her next one. The problem is, I think they're giving her a really good matchup for her first kind of big name in the women's strawweight division because Tecia Torres physically at least matches up quite well with her. When you think of sort of the bigger fighters in that division, the Joanna Jędrzejczyks, the Zhang Weili, the Rose Namajunas, and I know we're talking about the people right at the top of the division, but they're so much bigger than Tecia Torres. And you have to think physically, if you're smaller than even Tecia Torres, let's say she has to fight Joanna one day. Joanna's like 5'7" and really rangy. So as she moves up the rankings, I think her size disadvantage is going to play a really big factor. In this fight, I don't think it will because Tecia Torres, her striking has started to come along. She is a good wrestler. Her striking's still not great, though, because she doesn't throw kicks at all. She barely even throws an inside leg kick, and she's very boxing heavy, but she doesn't have much power behind her shots. It's very much just throw my arms out, and then I can get a hold of you, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Now, Brianna Van Buren doesn't really have to worry about any finishing potential for Tecia Torres. Tecia Torres is very much a decision fighter. It's either going to go unanimous decision win or unanimous decision loss, and that's going to be about it. And Torres, I know she's lost to extremely high level competition. I mean, like 3 of those 4 wins have been to 3 of the last 4 champions, which is pretty wild. And, one of them an all-time great. But she was really only doing enough to not get finished in a lot of those fights. Now, I know maybe it doesn't reflect the scorecards. There weren't a lot of 10-8 rounds. But if you actually watch those fights, they weren't very competitive at all. It was just one person was quite a bit better than the other, and it just so happened the other person happened to be Tecia Torres in those 4 accounts. Now, Brianna Van Buren, she's just kind of good everywhere. And I think that that's going to pay a really big effect in this fight because if she can somehow take down Tecia Torres, it's night over. She's going to be able to kind of out-grapple her, especially if she gets on top. At range, she's going to be the better striker out of the two because, again, Tecia Torres doesn't really use her range all that well. She has to get close for her to land anything of substance, and I think that's going to kind of play into Van Buren's game plan over time.
I mean, if you look at Brianna Van Buren, especially in that last fight, you brought it up, maybe she's going to struggle against some of the bigger, rangier fighters. We've seen her fight bigger, rangier fighters before, and especially with Souza. I mean, yeah, it was only 5 inches of height and difference, but still, it's a big deal, especially when you're fighting kind of up, because you would think maybe Brianna Van Buren at atom weight, but nope. Kind of taking on really good competition so far in the UFC. And I say so far with just the one fight, but here against Tecia Torres as well, somebody who's been training lately with Rose Namajunas, the former champ, who's got a big fight coming up against Jessica Andrade, the rematch. Now, in terms of this fight, I talked about the odds. Van Buren, a minus 210 favorite. Tecia Torres, somewhere around a plus 170 underdog. I think there's definitely, some value in Tecia Torres at those odds. Now, last night, Matt, because this is the second time we're going through these picks, I had gone with Tecia Torres. I did a little bit more of the tape study, and it's something that we've talked about a lot. Fighters that have the wrestling base that get into the grappling and jiu-jitsu as a complement, but they don't take a lot of time to really get into the jiu-jitsu aspect of things. We've seen that from Tecia Torres. She's not a fighter that excels off her back and trying to get back up to her feet. She can certainly do it against some of the best, but I just don't know, again, if Brianna Van Buren's that fighter. I think she is that fighter to get a win in this one, and she's going to be able to overpower Tecia Torres in a lot of aspects.
See, overpower, I think, is a bit of a strong term, especially Tecia Torres is a very physically strong fighter. I mean, Jessica Andrade was able to pick her up and slam her down, but that's because, she fought a bantamweight. She was winner over Raquel Pennington, so she's an extremely powerful athlete. Van Buren, I don't know if she has that same physicality to her game that can match Tecia Torres. I just think technique-wise, she's quite a bit better, and especially on the feet, too. Tecia Torres is striking. Although it's gotten better, it's still not at this great level by any means. And I think Van Buren's going to be able to kind of jab her way to a decision, for lack of a better term.
I'm going to agree with you. We're both going with Brianna Van Buren here. It should be a really interesting fight, especially for the entire makeup of the strawweight division. So you're not going to want to miss that fight. The rest of the predictions for the card, an extended look at Volkov and Blaydes. Matt, as we always say with Fight Night Picks, let's get into it.